In 1950, the average American home cost about $7,400. And it wasn't some cramped little box either. You got a real yard, solid wood floors, and neighbors who didn't just wave. They actually knew who you were. Today, that amount wouldn't even get you the rusty lock on a used storage shed in most cities. By 1955, a gallon of gas ran you about 29 cents. $5 filled the tank and still left you enough change for a soda and a pack of gum. And you didn't pump it. A kid in a crisp shirt did it for you, calling you sir, as he cleaned your windshield like he owned stock in the place. The 1955 Chevy Bel Air hit the streets like a movie star. Two-tone paint, chrome for days, and a V8 that sounded as good as it looked. Owning one wasn't just about getting around. It was a statement, a rolling announcement that you were doing all right. In 1952, Mr. Potato Head made TV history as the first toy ever advertised on television. You didn't get a plastic potato back then. You stuck the pieces into an actual potato from the kitchen. Imagine handing a kid today a raw potato and saying, "Here, have fun." They'd call child services. Around 1950, the U.S. population sat just above 150 million, less than half what it is now. Towns were smaller, streets quieter, and you recognized half the people you bumped into at the market. America felt big, but not overwhelming. Folks didn't lock their doors, not because danger didn't exist, but because trust did. If someone knocked, you let them in. If they didn't knock, it was probably a cousin returning your toolbox. Sunday dinner was not up for debate. Everyone showed up, grandparents, cousins, and that one uncle who told the same story every time. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, a Jell-O mold nobody liked, but everyone scooped just to be polite. It wasn't about the food. It was about being there. Drive-in theaters were the place to be. You parked your car, hung the speaker on the window, and watched movies under the stars. If luck was on your side, the popcorn wasn't burned, and if luck was really on your side, she held your hand. TV dinners arrived in 1953, foil tray, 98 cents, zero cleanup. It was the future, and nobody complained about processed food. It was convenient and, frankly, pretty exciting. Color TVs started selling in 1954, but with price tags around $1,000, nearly 10 grand today. Most families stuck with black and white. When a neighbor splurged on color, half the street crowded into their living room to watch a greenish, slightly off-hue broadcast of whatever was on. The interstate highway system didn't exist until Eisenhower approved it in 1956. Before that, road trips were more like expeditions. You packed maps, spare tires, tools, and sandwiches, because if the car broke down, there wasn't exactly a gas station waiting around the corner. Elvis dropped his first single, "That's All Right," in 1954. Grown-ups thought he moved too much, sang too wild. Teenagers thought he hung the moon. He didn't just perform. He rewired the country's idea of music. Milk arrived on your doorstep, in glass bottles delivered by the milkman before sunrise. You heard the clink of glass and knew morning had arrived. If you were lucky, your mom let you peel off the little paper cap. Every kid either had a radio flyer wagon or wished they did. It hauled anything: toys, groceries, pets, younger siblings. In the rain, you flipped it over, and suddenly it was a fort, a shield, a pirate ship. Your imagination did the upgrades. Most families owned one car, one TV, and one bathroom. Yet somehow it worked. Kids argued over the dial, not the remote, and taking turns wasn't negotiable. In 1950, the average salary was around $3,200 a year. And it actually meant something. You could buy a house, raise a family, and still manage a vacation, even if it was just going to grandma's. School lunches were simple: meatloaf, peas, mashed potatoes, and a carton of milk. You didn't dare complain. The lunch lady looked like she could lift the entire stove by herself. Television antennas popped up everywhere in the early 50s. Families climbed onto garages armed with a wrench and pure optimism, turning the antenna little by little until the static vanished, and I Love Lucy came through like magic. If your mom needed bread, she didn't check her phone. She sent you. Neighborhood grocery stores were small, friendly, and personal. You handed over $1 and still walked out with change. Most TVs had screens the size of a dinner plate and weighed more than a small refrigerator. No remote, no pause. If Dad wanted the channel changed, he pointed at you. The first Waffle House opened in 1955 in Georgia, a tiny building serving cheap, hot food all day and all night. Truckers, teenagers, and sleepy early risers all ended up shoulder to shoulder at the counter. In 1953, the first successful open-heart surgery using a heart-lung machine took place, a miracle for its time. Stopping the heart, fixing it, starting it again. It sounded impossible, until it wasn't. People shared house keys with neighbors without a second thought. No alarms, no cameras, just trust. And maybe a thank you pie waiting on your table when you returned. Kids played outside all day. No screens, no apps, just bikes, stickball, and the rule that you came home when the streetlights blinked on. You knew every kid on your block, and everyone somehow found something fun to do. Coca-Cola came in glass bottles, cold and sharp, the first sip hitting like lightning. Vending machines took nickels and nothing more. Phones were rotary dials attached to the wall, and if you messed up the last number, you started over. Long-distance calls were special occasions. Party lines meant your neighbor could accidentally listen in, or accidentally on purpose. Nobody needed a gym. Chores kept you fit, mowing with a manual mower, chopping firewood, hanging laundry, hauling water. Grandpas everywhere had calves sculpted by real work. Flying was a formal affair. Men wore suits. Women wore hats and gloves. You got meals, legroom, and polite smiles, not pajama pants and emotional support llamas. A man's toolbox was practically sacred. Heavy steel, worn handles, tools that lasted decades. If something broke, you fixed it. If your neighbor's mower failed, you walked over and helped. Polio haunted the early 50s. Kids were warned away from public pools during outbreaks. Then the Salk vaccine came in 1955, and it felt like the entire country exhaled at once. If your family had a station wagon, you were doing well. Kids piled into the back with no seat belts, windows down, dog drooling out the side. Dad yelled over the radio. Mom handed out sandwiches from a cooler. It was chaotic, loud, and perfect. And the barbershop? That was the neighborhood's unofficial storytelling headquarters. Buzzing clippers, shared secrets, and talk that drifted between gossip and wisdom. You didn't need Yelp back then. You needed Lou, the barber who'd been trimming hair since the Eisenhower years and still only charged $2. His prices never budged, his stories never ended, and somehow he knew every guy's life story without ever leaving that one chair. GPS didn't exist. If you got turned around, you pulled over and asked someone at a gas station. They didn't shrug. They grabbed a napkin, drew a map, and sent you off like they were personally responsible for getting you home. Trusting strangers wasn't a gamble. It was normal. When the ice cream truck rattled into the neighborhood, kids didn't walk. They took off like they were running for Olympic gold. Barefoot, out of breath, clutching quarters that warmed in their palms. Bomb pops, drumsticks, rocket pops. Nobody counted calories. You just let the sticky sweetness drip down your wrists while the sun baked everything in sight. Shop class in high school wasn't a formality. You learned real skills: welding, wiring, woodworking, tuning small engines. You walked across the graduation stage, not only with a diploma, but with the ability to fix a lawnmower or patch a roof without calling anyone. Useful wasn't optional. It was standard. In 1951, Idaho switched on the first nuclear power plant, and though it only lit up 4 bulbs, the whole nation felt the jolt. The atomic future sounded like science fiction, thrilling and a little terrifying. People imagined jetpacks and robot butlers, even while reading the news by lamplight. Toasters, blenders, waffle irons, appliances gleamed like chrome trophies in the kitchen. Every gadget looked straight out of a futuristic catalog. And when something jammed or sputtered, Dad didn't replace it. He popped it open on the kitchen table with a flathead screwdriver and got it running again. Kids rode their bikes with no helmets, no pads, no fear. Just streamers on the handlebars, scraped shins, and the occasional spectacular crash. You limped home, sat still while Mom dabbed iodine that burned like betrayal, and headed right back outside. Television didn't go all night. Around midnight, everything shut down after the national anthem, and the screen faded to black or static. That was your cue to go to bed, or risk Dad waking up to bark from the doorway. Turn that blasted thing off. Car keys were almost optional in the 50s. Some trucks didn't even lock. You stuck the keys under the visor, walked away, and trusted they'd still be there later. Today, your appliances need passwords. Back then, all you needed was honesty. If you came down with something, you didn't look up symptoms online. You phoned the family doctor, and he actually arrived at your door, bag in hand, stethoscope ready, smelling faintly of car leather and old books. Somehow, just seeing him made you feel half cured. Penny candy really cost a penny. Huge jars held Tootsie Rolls, Mary Janes, Jawbreakers, and gum that tasted good for exactly 12 seconds. A nickel made you feel rich. At home, the thermostat wasn't a battlefield. In winter, you put on extra socks. In summer, you drank ice water and opened windows. If you dared complain, Dad muttered something about building character, and you nodded fast so he wouldn't say it again. Sunday mornings were for radio, gospel, news, and the sound of bacon popping in a skillet. Dad read the paper, Mom stirred the coffee, and the world moved slow enough to savor. In the 1950s, most milk, meat, and eggs came from farms just a short drive away. Grocery stores weren't filled with 50 brands of cereal. You bought what was local, fresh, and familiar. Organic wasn't a label. It was just normal. Cigarette ads were everywhere. Billboards, magazines, TV. Doctors even endorsed certain brands. It sounds ridiculous now, but at the time, lighting up was as ordinary as tying your shoes. Your boss smoked at his desk. Your uncle smoked after dinner, and nobody blinked. Teachers ruled the classroom with strict voices and wooden rulers. You said yes, ma'am, or yes, sir, and you sat up straight unless you wanted a note sent home, and that was a fate worse than detention. Nothing got thrown out if it could be fixed. Radios got retubed, shoes resoled, irons rewired. Repair wasn't a chore. It was pride. When something finally gave out completely, you felt like you'd lost a loyal companion. Men with briefcases and hats filled the morning sidewalks. They kissed their wives goodbye, caught the early train, and worked office jobs that were steady, if not glamorous. Every evening they stepped off the platform tired but satisfied. Jell-O salad was at peak popularity. Lime green, wobbling, full of fruit or mystery vegetables, suspended like they were trapped in time. Nobody admitted it tasted strange. Everyone scooped some anyway. When a baby arrived in the neighborhood, people showed up with casseroles, blankets, and a crib someone's cousin had outgrown. No registries, no online lists, just community. And yes, the new dad passed around cigars like it was required by law. Roller skates clattered like thunder on the sidewalk. Metal wheels, adjustable clamps, and a skate key dangling from a string around your neck. If something broke mid-ride, you walked home barefoot, proud of your battle wounds. Diners had jukeboxes that came alive with a clunk and a whirl after you dropped in a dime. One song from Chuck Berry or Buddy Holly could silence the entire booth as everyone listened for their favorite part. Paperboys were the original hustlers. Up before sunrise, tossing newspapers with sniper-level precision, trudging through rain and heat with zero complaints. If you wanted spending money, you earned it one front porch at a time. In 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, a shiny metal ball that sent America into a panic. Suddenly, everyone cared about science. Kids practiced spelling astronaut before they even knew what it meant. A movie ticket in 1950 cost 48 cents. Under $1 got you popcorn, a seat, and maybe a cartoon before the main feature. No advance bookings, no endless trailer scrolling. You went, you watched, you enjoyed. In 1953, Watson and Crick announced DNA's double helix. Most Americans had no idea what it meant, but it would end up rewriting science, medicine, and even crime solving. At the time, it just looked like a weird ladder in a textbook. A brand new Ford F-100 in the early 50s cost under $1,500. No touchscreens, no fancy sensors. Just steel, an AM radio, and a bench seat wide enough for 3 grown men and a loyal dog. And when something rattled, you fixed it yourself. The Korean War, from 1950 to 1953, sent more than 1 million Americans into harsh, frozen battlefields. It didn't get the spotlight like World War II, but it carved deep scars that the veterans rarely spoke about. Most homes didn't have air conditioning. Summertime meant fans in every corner, cold lemonade, and sometimes sleeping in the basement where it was cooler. Complaining didn't do much. It was just part of the season. And Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a film star. She defined an era. A face, a voice, a presence everyone recognized. Even people who never saw her movies knew her name. In 1955, she founded her own production company, an almost unthinkable move for a woman at that time. To some, she was just a blonde bombshell, the kind Hollywood loved to frame a certain way. But behind the scenes, she was sharp, ambitious, and absolutely unwilling to play by Hollywood's rules. Meanwhile, most homes had only one bathroom, and it was usually pink, mint green, or baby blue. The toilet, the tub, even the tiles all pastel. And if a family had 3 kids sharing one tub, bath night turned into a full-blown military operation. Oldest first, youngest last, all of them in the same rapidly cooling water. In 1958, the microchip was invented. Almost no one outside the lab paid attention, unaware that the tiny invention would eventually power computers, phones, and nearly every device the modern world depends on. Back then, people were still more amazed by the automatic garage door. American Bandstand made its national debut in 1957. Hosted by a clean-cut young man named Dick Clark, teens danced in saddle shoes and poodle skirts, while parents watched from the kitchen with folded arms and disapproving looks. It wasn't just a music show. It shaped what cool looked like for an entire country. And if you wanted to cool off in the summer, you didn't go to a luxury gym. You went to the community pool if your town even had one. The chlorine was strong enough to bleach your hair. The lifeguards had zero patience. And somehow, every kid still cannonballed straight into the deep end. Also in 1958, the hula hoop hit store shelves and sold an unbelievable 25 million units in just 4 months. Kids spun plastic rings in driveways, parks, and schoolyards until they were dizzy. Neighborhood contests popped up overnight, and parents secretly tried the hoop after dark, usually throwing their backs out, but smiling anyway. Homemade ice cream wasn't just dessert. It was a full event. You poured in rock salt, cranked a heavy metal handle until your arms were numb, and prayed the mixture set right. And when it finally did, it was the coldest, creamiest thing you had ever tasted. Nothing from a store could compare. Rock and roll didn't gradually arrive. It exploded. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Elvis, No one had ever heard anything like them on the radio before. Parents panicked, preachers warned against the music, and teenagers just cranked the volume higher. For the first time, music felt dangerous in a fun, irresistible way. You didn't buy furniture from websites. In the 1950s, you went to the local department store, sat on every couch, and probably got offered a cup of coffee while you browsed. The guy selling it to you lived only 2 streets over, and if something broke, he'd come help fix it. Around the same time, McDonald's had just started franchising. The original menu had 9-item simple things like a 15-cent hamburger and 10-cent fries. No apps, no delivery. You walked up to a window, paid in coins, and ate your burger on the hood of your car. And somehow, it was perfect. House calls from salesmen were completely normal. They sold vacuums, encyclopedias, brushes, anything you could think of. These men wore pressed suits, smiled wide, and gave live demonstrations right there in your living room. Sometimes Mom bought something. Sometimes she didn't. But she always offered them coffee. It was the polite thing to do. In 1959, Hawaii officially became the 50th state. For many Americans, it felt exotic and impossibly far away beaches, volcanoes, hula skirts. Suddenly, postcards from a tropical paradise began showing up in mailboxes across the country. Everyone wanted to visit America's newest state. Typewriters clacked in every office, school, and home study. If you made a mistake, you used whiteout or you just started over. And there was nothing quite like the sound of someone hitting return that loud, satisfying ding and slide that meant they were deep in their work. On Halloween night, kids didn't buy costumes. They made them. Old bed sheets turned into ghosts, cardboard became robots, and a bit of soot on the face made the perfect cowboy beard. They went house to house with pillowcases, no parents in sight, just kids, candy, and a night that felt like pure magic. In the 1950s, televisions didn't sit on stands. They were the furniture. Heavy wooden cabinets with built-in legs and fabric speaker fronts dominated the living room. And when it broke, Dad didn't throw it away. He called the repairman, who showed up with a toolbox and usually a cigarette hanging from his lip. Men wore hats not as fashion statements, but because it was simply what you did. Fedoras, flat caps, pork pies. You put one on before leaving the house, tipped it when greeting someone, and took it off indoors. No one questioned it. Women curled their hair with metal rollers and dried it under giant helmet dryers that looked like sci-fi props. The salon smelled like hairspray, perm solution, and gossip. It wasn't just about looking good, it was a place to talk. In 1957, a little-known author named Dr. Seuss released The Cat in the Hat, written using only 236 words to help early readers. It didn't just become a hit, it transformed story time into something wild, fun, and unforgettable. Postcards were a big deal. Every trip, even if it was only 2 towns over, meant grabbing a postcard and sending it back home. They cost only a few cents and carried simple messages like thinking of you. People kept them like souvenirs. Some still do. Bank hours were strict. If you didn't make it by 3 p.m. on Friday, you were broke until Monday. No ATMs, no apps, just a passbook, a teller behind glass, and a loud mechanical stamp punching your deposit into history. In 1955, Disneyland opened its gates in California, with Walt Disney himself walking the grounds on opening day. There were only 18 rides, and the park ran into major hiccups, from a plumber strike to melted asphalt under the summer sun. But even with all of that, it still managed to become the happiest place on earth. School desks still had ink wells, even though most kids were already using ballpoint pens. The little round holes stayed like fossils from another era. You poke your pencil through them during math class and wonder how anyone ever managed to write with actual feathers dipped in ink. Church on Sunday wasn't a maybe, it was the anchor of the entire week. Families dressed up, Kids sat still, mostly, and after the service everyone shook hands and went home to roast chicken. It wasn't just religion, it was routine. It held the whole week together. Encyclopedias were how you looked things up. A salesman would knock on the door, carrying a full set of Britannica, and your parents would pay for it in monthly installments. If you needed to write a school report, that big shelf of books was your internet. Lunch boxes in the 50s were heavy metal, built to survive a schoolyard war. Roy Rogers, Hopalong Cassidy, or Howdy Doody on the side, and inside a bologna sandwich, an apple, and maybe a thermos of milk. No one traded lunches unless there were Oreos involved. The first credit card as we know it, the Diners Club, launched in 1950, started as a convenient way for businessmen to pay for meals without carrying cash. By the end of the decade, more and more folks were signing up and forgetting to read the fine print. In 1951, the first coast-to-coast live television broadcast aired. President Truman spoke from the White House, and people across the country watched at the exact same moment. It was the beginning of a new kind of connection. One screen, one nation, one shared instant. Yard games were everything. Horseshoes, jacks, marbles, jump rope, and lawn darts, the metal kind that could skewer a foot if you weren't careful. Kids didn't need instructions. They made up rules as they went and played until dark. Canned food was king spam, condensed soup, and canned fruit cocktail with its single lonely cherry. Housewives stocked their pantries like mini fallout shelters, quick, cheap, and shelf-stable. It wasn't gourmet, but it fed a family of 5 on one paycheck and fueled more casseroles than you could count. Bar soap was the default Irish Spring, Life buoy, dial packed in cardboard boxes, smelling strong, lasting forever. Every bathroom had a washcloth and a mystery drawer, filled with half-melted pink and green soap chunks stuck to each other like glue. Brownie cameras exploded in popularity thanks to Kodak. Suddenly, anyone could afford to capture memories. Birthdays, beach trips, backyard BBQs all, preserved in grainy black and white. And if your finger wasn't in the frame, it was considered a great photo. Every home had ashtrays, even if not everyone smoked glass, ceramic, sometimes built right into the furniture. Guests lit up at the dinner table, in the car, even in the doctor's waiting room. Nobody thought twice. Smoke was part of the scenery. TV shows always ended with a moral. Whether it was Lassie, The Lone Ranger, or Father Knows Best, there was always a clear lesson by the end. Be kind, tell the truth, don't climb into the well. Simple messages, but they stuck far more than you'd expect. If your parents bought something on layaway, it meant you didn't take it home yet. You made payments little by little until it was fully paid off, no credit, no interest, just patience. And when you finally brought the item home, it meant something. In 1951, direct dial long-distance calling became possible for the first time. No operator needed. Before that, if you wanted to call across the country, you had to ask a real human to connect the line. With direct dial, coast to coast suddenly felt closer. Car interiors were metal, not plastic. Leave your Chevy in the sun, and the steering wheel could fry an egg. The seat springs left stripes on your legs. There were no cup holders, no airbags, just raw steel, sticky vinyl, and a whole lot of attitude. In 1952, the first barcode patent was granted. It looked like a bullseye. Nobody had scanners yet, but the idea of a machine reading products felt like pure science fiction. It took another 20 years to catch on, but it all started with a doodle and a dream in a 1950s lab. Most homes had one phone number, one corded phone, and absolutely zero privacy. If it rang, you ran. And if your teenage daughter hogged the line, everyone knew it. There was no voicemail, just hoping whoever called would try again. Sidewalk chalk wasn't store-bought. You made it from whatever white rock you could find. Driveways turned into racetracks, hopscotch grids, and masterpieces washed away by the first summer rain. And nobody needed instructions. You just drew. Every town had a local soda fountain or lunch counter. You sat on a red swivel stool, ordered a cherry coke or a grilled cheese, and spun in circles while the waitress yelled your name like she'd known you forever, because she probably had. Every town had a local soda fountain or lunch counter. You sat on a red stool, ordered a cherry coke or a grilled cheese, and spun in circles while the waitress yelled your name like she'd known you for years, because she probably had. And maybe, if you close your eyes just right, you can still hear the clatter of dishes, smell the warm grease on the grill, and feel the simple magic of a world where time moved slower. So if this took you back, go on and give it a like and subscribe so we can keep walking down these old roads together.